Hey everybody, I had promised to put a little video up on the four um, resources that are assigned to device. So I wanted to real quick talk about this. I should have done it last week, so I wanted to tonight. Um, the Whenever you add a device to a computer, the computer needs to assign it resources so that the processor and other devices communicate with it. And in the old days of a computer, everything was built onto the computer, and it was very set in what it could do. And by adding expansion buses and other chips, like the chipset, to add more functionality to the motherboard, the computer became this, a larger uh, thing with more abilities. So for the computer, the processor to communicate with all of these devices, certain things had to be set up so that it could keep things organized and data could go to the right device. And they came up with four resources. Resources are I/O address, interrupt request, memory address, and direct memory access. So these four main resources are set up. And in the old days, we used to set them up manually. We'd set jumpers and things like that to set these addresses on the device. And when you plugged it in, the computer would try to communicate with it. And sometimes it would work, and sometimes it wouldn't. You'd have to redo things. So what they came up with is a thing called plug and play. And plug and play is the chip on each device on on like a sound card or a video card. That when you plug it in, the computer asks like what resources do you need, and the device will request certain things it needs, and the computer assigns it its resources based on what its needs are. So it's called plug and play. And so the operating system and the device has to be plug and play compatible, which everything is now. It used to be not that way, but everything is now. Anyway, so what they did, so let's talk about the resources real quick. I/O address, very easy. Every device that is in the computer needs some type of address because the bus that everything is connected to is like one street. And all the houses on the street need their individual addresses. That way the the mail for a certain house can go to the right house. So if the mailman is driving down the street, it knows that house number 1 is this address, house number 2 has this address. So depending on what mail he has, it can go to the right house. So same thing with the device. Since all the devices are sitting in the same bus, they're all in the same bus. When data comes down to a device, all the devices see it. But since the address is for a certain device, that device goes, well, that's me, and accepts the data. The rest kind of just ignore it. So that's I/O address. And you can have a range of I/O addresses because some devices need more addresses depending on how many things they have to do. I mean, some things have more than one function. Like a sound card has MIDI, it has output sound, it has input sound, it has a bunch of stuff. So it can have a range of I/O addresses for different reasons. The next thing is IRQ. And IRQ was invented because sometimes the device needs to get the attention of the processor. A processor can talk to any device anytime it wants to, but when a device wants to talk to the processor, it needs to set what is called an IRQ. Now, IRQs in the old days were actual wires, and you would set an IRQ level for a card, and the card would know, well, my wire number 1 is my IRQ wire, and when I hit it, the processor goes, ooh, this is IRQ number 1, that's the sound card, I know what that is. So every device had a certain wire we would use. With only 4 wires in the old days, so you only had IRQs 0 through 15. So you only had 15 IRQs. Well, now we have a lot more because we have so many more devices. They're called virtual IRQs. But that's what an IRQ is. It gets the attention of the processor. And when it says, I need your attention, the processor will stop and say, what do you need? Immediately. The next one is direct memory access. Direct memory access is the ability for a device to talk directly to memory instead of having to go through the processor. And the reason why this is important is because the processor is so busy processing everything, the less we can have it do for us, the better, because then it can do other things. So when a device wants to access some data, like a sound card wants to play a sound, instead of having to have that sound go through the processor to the sound card, it can access directly from memory and pull the data out and play it. So that's good because it takes off some of the the work the processor has to do. The next thing is a memory address. A memory address is for a device that the processor will go, look, you need memory because you're always pulling stuff out of memory. I'm going to give you a piece of memory that's just for you. Okay, and actually the card requests it when you put the card in. It says, I need memory. So the processor goes, okay, I'm going to reserve this little piece of memory for you, and when you need to store something, that's where you're going to put it all the time. And I won't put anything there for anything but you. So it's a memory address. So if a device is going to pull things out of memory, it knows to go to that location and pull it. And again, you can have a memory range. You can have a lot of different memory locations depending on what the device needs. So that's what is called a memory address. Okay. Now, does every card need all four main resources, which are I/O address, IRQ, direct memory access, and memory allocation? No. Some devices have one, some devices all of them. It just depends on the device. And again, that little I/O, that little chip on the card will tell the computer what it needs. The last thing I want to talk about is bus mastering. Bus mastering is the ability for a device to take control of the bus, talk directly to another device on the bus without having to get the processor involved. Just another way to take some of the work off the processor's back. So if the sound card wants to talk directly to the hard drive, the sound card can take control and talk to the hard drive directly. You see this a lot in hard drives and CD-ROMs. Whenever a CD-ROM or a hard drive is pulling data off a CD-ROM, it takes control of the bus, and that way data can flow in the bus directly to the two devices without the processor getting involved, which is again helps with all the work the processor has to do. So that's anyway. Those are your four. Actually, it's 5 resources, but the main 4 are I/O address, IRQ, direct memory access, and memory allocation address. And of course, we can throw bus mastering in there because that's considered a resource. So these are all resources that every device needs so that it can talk to the processor and have all the data organized and going to the right place. Cool.